Today's guest is Abby Koss. She is the digital experience leader of state and local government at Amazon Web Services. Abby did a stint with 18F, and for those who don't know what that is, it's a really unique government entity that uses new innovations and ideas to try to push things forward in new ways. She also worked at FutureGov in the UK doing content design for local government. And I'm just really interested in hearing your story today, Abby. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So for those who haven't had a chance to get to know you, talk about your background, where you're from, who you are, and what you do.
Absolutely. So I'm from Youngstown, Ohio, which is halfway between Cleveland and Pittsburgh. It's super blue collar. It's a steel town. I'm the first generation of my family to be like a traditional college student. So we come from a family of people where like the jobs are things that make sense. Like a teacher is a job that makes sense. A firefighter is a job that makes sense. A digital experience leader for state and local government is not necessarily something. But so I grew up in Youngstown for, my whole childhood I was there. And then I went to college. Sort of the closest college to me was this little school called Hiram. It was like 800 feral kids in a cornfield. It was great. I was a little young going in because I have a summer birthday. And it genuinely didn't occur to me that I could apply to anywhere except the local state school and the local liberal arts school. I got into both, and the choice was whether to be a high school band director, which was my initial dream, or to go and just sort of study communications and English and theater and figure it out from there.
Wow. And so what did you decide?
I decided, and actually it's so funny that this conversation is about sort of how you pick your direction. And for a really long time, I just let other people do it. I really loved my choir director. And I sat down with her and I said, look, I got into Youngstown State and I got into Hiram and I don't know what to do. Will you tell me what to do? And she said, you're going to Hiram. And so I said, okay. And I went, and she was absolutely right. I mean, maybe there's a version of me that went to Youngstown State and was like an incredible band director. I don't know her, but what Hiram really set me up to do was learn how to think creatively and learn how to really, really write, which is the thing that I love the most, and expose me to a lot of people and ideas that I didn't know about when I was younger.
And so when you went there, did you pick a major that you stuck with, or did you try a few things out?
Absolutely not. I wanted to major in theater, to which my parents like strongly refused. I don't know what it was about majoring in flute at Youngstown State that was okay, but majoring in theater at Hiram wasn't. So I majored in communications, which seemed very middle of the road. And then I just took all of the electives that I loved. And at the end of my junior year, I was in a poetry class. And the professor, his name was Willard Greenwood, he wrote on something that I had written, you should be an English major. And it had never occurred to me that, like, I loved English so much that I didn't even think it was a thing that you sort of got to do, So I looked back, and it turned out that I had taken all of the optional classes to be an English major with a creative writing emphasis, and none of the requirements. So I spent my senior year taking like Brit Lit 1, American Lit 2. And so I ended up graduating with a communications degree, but then also the English and writing degree.
Wow, that's amazing. I love it when that kind of chance works out for you.
Absolutely. And one class away from a theater minor. They let me, my bonus classes, I was 100% like, no, I'm still gonna do plays.
Oh, what your parents would have said if you had finished that.
I know, right?
So then what was next after school? Did you have a concept of what you wanted to do for a job?
I always tell people there's two versions of this story. There's the one where I make a smart choice and the one where I make like a 21-year-old choice. I always tell people that I wanted to move to a big city that was not really more than 500 miles away from my family. and Washington, D.C. was the right choice for me. I also really had a crush on someone who moved to DC. And I was like, this seems fine. What if I just showed up? We did not ever end up dating, but I actually ended up staying longer. So I got an AmeriCorps job. I was in Vista, which is sort of the nonprofit version. And I spent a year at the Points of Light Foundation, which was George W. Bush's, 1,000 Points of Light. I then became an intern for the Human Rights Campaign. I was part of the religion and faith team. I've always really, really loved sort of the unconventional middle grounds between things like being queer and having faith, or business and government, or like any number of these things. Mm-hmm. Being an English major and having a career that makes sense, So I did that for a while. I did some nonprofit work. And then I found myself at a small digital grassroots firm. I'm part of this micro generation that we were good at MySpace and GeoCities websites. And we came of age at a time where nobody wanted to do the email newsletters or the website. So we took our sort of janky HTML skills and used them to get jobs. So I did that for a while, and then my company got acquired by Edelman. It's a big public relations firm. And I spent about 5 years there. I was part of the grassroots team and then part of the food and nutrition team towards the end. Again, sort of an unconventional spot for me. I had a mentor I really loved. It was work that I thought was just fascinating. And the things that I learned there about messaging and positioning and getting people to agree with you and making compromises are things that I have found to be incredibly useful in every job I've ever had since then. I'm so grateful for that time.
It's incredible how a good mentor makes all the difference.
Absolutely. And I was unbearable. I think back at, the industry that I'm in, we struggle to have younger people there. It's always been sort of a mid-career place to start. And I always feel like I haven't quite done my due diligence of having somebody under my wing who is too ambitious, too mouthy, too confident, total mess, and helping with them the things that many kind people help to do with me.
Yeah, and they also, if you do happen to find somebody like that, which I've been lucky enough to do that at least once, they make you push your own boundaries as well.
I hope so.
I mean, in any mentor relationship, it goes both ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what was next after that?
I got to a point where I had, let me think of the best way to say this. I was in DC for 10 years. I really loved my work. I learned a lot from people. I complained about a lot of things. And then I ended up in a relationship with somebody who was in the UK. And I was turning 30. I had never been to graduate school. It was something that I didn't necessarily feel vulnerable about, but a lot of people who were around me had like masters in public policies or MBAs, and they just had this level of knowledge that I didn't. So I thought, okay, I'm going to, maybe I could do something to sort of feel like a peer, even though I was already a peer. So I moved to London and I did a graduate degree in politics and communication at the London School of Economics. I did my thesis on propaganda. I've always really, really loved propaganda, which I suppose befits somebody who would then work in PR. But I don't know. I like a good story. I like messaging. So I studied Cold War civil defense films and the messaging in them. It turns out that if you don't believe the things that the government believes, you're like, oh, gee whiz, I don't know. And if you do believe the things the government believes, you're like, yes, I'm smart and right. It was wild. It was wild.
I don't know if that's changed much.
I know, right?
Oh, wow. So that's fascinating. So I never even real I thought through that that would be a course of study, right? I mean, that you'd be able to study that. And then out of that, now is that your entire time in the UK, you transitioned into a job after that, right? Or you did a job at the same time?
Right. I should actually, so a piece of this that's almost a little bit missing is I had done this PR thing for a long time, and it was never truly satisfying. And I remember going to parties and telling people, like, I feel like I have this magic wand and I'm just waving it at the wrong stuff.
Hmm.
Like, I am doing good work, but I am not doing good work. And I ended up taking an improv class with a woman who became my best friend. And she was part of this really early community of people who were doing better government services. She was at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And through her, I started to get to know that there was this big community of people, and they were all dedicated to being smart and good at the internet and smart and good at content and design, but using it to be smart and good for the American public, which was honestly not something that would even occur to me to exist growing up. And even after maybe 8 years in DC, still didn't occur to me. I'm in the nation's capital, and I didn't think like, oh, government, that could be better. So it was and still is to a certain extent kind of a hard field to break into. But through that friend, I was able to get a first job, which then transitioned into some think tank roles when I was in London. And then when I moved back to the United States, I joined 18F. I remember getting to work with, I had as a colleague the first person who ever showed me what content design was. And I think there were like 2 or 3 people doing it in the country. And I remember thinking, oh, I'm done. This is it. This is what I will always do.
Hmm.
And it's not exactly what I do day to day, but it is still the work that I love the most.
Well, it is impactful, right? When you start talking about 18F, now you're talking government services, public facing, things that are important and can't be messed up and
Exactly.
need to be more, you need to be understood. Like it's classic, right? Government forms are a nightmare. Government websites can be a nightmare. And if you have somebody like yourself with the skills to consider the experience and how that should be crafted, we can make that experience better for the public when they have to interact with the government, which they don't like to do.
100%. And the other part that was so wonderful about how 18F worked, and other shops as well, the United States Digital Service, the Defense Digital Service, PIFs, a lot of state and local digital service teams. There's a real sense that part of the remit, done well, done right, is to help skill up other government leaders in modern digital design and delivery.
Mhm.
There's a quote that I've always loved, which is tech talent is cheap and abundant. But it takes a special person to have 20 years of experience in Medicaid, or to have spent their entire career
Mm.
as a 911 dispatcher, a 911 leader, a head of the 911 like society, right? So we can teach tech to people. That's very doable, but you can't teach that level of knowledge and experience and passion and understanding how to work a system. So that was always part of the stuff that I loved about 18F was, working with a contracting officer who all of a sudden you found out like had a master's degree in anthropology and was the best user researcher you'd met in 10 years. It was just really satisfying work.
Yeah, that is interesting. I've always joked around because I'm in IT and I was a software developer for many, many years. And I would say, look, I don't know the math as well as that engineer
Exactly.
who has some formula that doesn't even make sense to me. Sure, I could probably go figure it out, sit down and figure, but I don't need to, right? I'm not the expert. I'll take their formula, I'll implement their formula. The product will do what they need it to do, and everybody's better for it. So I'm glad you acknowledged that because it's not talked about a lot. There are a lot of people in IT who believe they are the kind of top of the heap, if you will. when they come and deliver for customers, and they got to remember that the customer is smarter than they are in that chosen field.
Exactly, 100%. And it it almost to me does a disservice to the depth of the IT knowledge that people do have. Like I realize I just shaded like tech talent is cheap and abundant, but again, maybe somebody who's running an IT shop for supporting an entire agency for 20 years, like the information they have about what it means to do change management, how you have to work with procurement, the challenges that people are having with recruitment and retention. Like that stuff is so crucial. And I don't need somebody to be a line of business expert if they're in the tech shop. I just need them to like help me because they are the tech expert. And like that is incredible knowledge that I will never bring to the table. I find that so I work in this team of leaders that come from government and education. Often this will be one of their first private sector jobs. And the folks who really, really thrive, I think, and this isn't just my team, it's sort of across, our entire organization, are the ones who are so confident in the things that they know and are so comfortable knowing where those things end, pulling in other kinds of experts, pulling in just other resources when they need them, sort of being the one really cool piece of a larger, very cool puzzle.
That is an understated skill. Somebody who has the ability to be very much an expert in what they know and know where that box ends, so that they include the right other people. Oh, it's not a talent that everybody has.
No, and to be fair, I'm waxing very poetic about myself. I'm a full pain in the ass. Like I will put my nose in a million places it doesn't belong. But usually, especially with like the lines of business, when it comes to those agencies, I'm pretty good at and grateful that I have built up the skills to be good at saying like, look, let me do your wireframing, let me do your user research, let me do your best practices in approach. You tell me what makes sense situationally. You tell me what belongs here, and I'll tell you how it should be shaped.
So then what brought you to Amazon Web Services to do, I know it's still state and local government, so you still got your public, focus, but what brought you to Amazon?
So 18F, at the time that I was there, I think things are changing. It was term limited. So you could work there for about 4 years. And I started as a content designer, and then I became the director of strategy for a while. And then I started this team called Change Strategy. And basically it was a delivery team, but I don't think I knew what delivery was. And I don't think the org knew what delivery was. And it was sort of predicated on this idea that there needed to be a team of humans who were shepherding the engagement and being able to do the change management and recognize when the customer was unhappy or we didn't have the buy-in that we needed to move forward or we needed help. And at that time in the organization, there were so many other priorities that I just couldn't get like the time, the staff, the buy-in, what I needed to make this particular thing successful. And I got to the end of my term and I could have fought to stay longer. And I was more like, you know what? This has been great. I'm going to go try something else. And so I knew that there was through a friend at 18F, I knew that there was a team at AWS that was working in the ways that I like to work. And it continues to be run by somebody who helped set up 18F and USDS, like very much of that early, Obama tech search community. And between that really, really stunningly aligned opportunity and the fact that like Amazon scared the hell out of me, that's why I decided to do it. I try to run forward towards the most frightening thing possible because otherwise I'll just sit and I won't learn and I'll keep being scared and I'll keep being resentful. So yeah, I joined and my first day I burst into tears immediately and had to take half a Xanax because it was so different. And 18F had been just this constant like cacophony of friendship and collaboration and everything, which in retrospect doesn't leave a lot of time for doing your job. So I got to this place that felt so big and so corporate and so alone. And I immediately tried to rescind my resignation, which I think is why GSA knows now that you can technically rescind a resignation. But I sort of was like, you know what? I'll give it 6 months. I'll see what happens. I cannot judge this in the first week or the first 2 weeks. By 6 months, I was glad that I had moved. By a year, I really enjoyed it. By a year and a half, I loved it.
That's awesome. And like you said, you take this step. I think that was very wise of you. Not everybody would do what you did, which is, oh, let me give it a little bit of time, right? And there are different milestones of time to see how that experience has changed, and then call it quits, right? If it's not the right place. That's very wise. Because I talk to a lot of people who make those gut reactions and would have gone immediately back to 18F. And sure, maybe that would have worked out very well for them as well. It may have worked out very well for you as well. But then you would have possibly missed out on what you're experiencing now once you gave it the time it needed to kind of, win you over, if you will.
Yeah, 100%. And like my urge to rage quit is often strong. And so I'm just very grateful for, I had a really good manager. I had friends who I leaned on disproportionately hard. I made sure that I spent time with people that I loved, and that then gave me extra bolstering to have patience and find a spot for myself, settle in.
So as you've gone through your career, it's been very interesting and unique places and unique opportunities. What's something that you wish was different, whether it's something in the industry, in the way we do things, or whether it's something in how you've managed your career to this point? What's something that you would have done differently looking back?
I think for the industry, for sure, I mentioned earlier, it's tough to get in as a first or second job.
Mhm.
Things are changing. There's a thing called the US Digital Corps that brings in young tech talent in their first or second jobs into the federal government. That's a huge game changer. But there's, at least from the perspective that I've had, these types of shops are often mid to senior career, and there's not a ton of room for early folks to come in. And the jobs that I had in my sort of formative years, like I learned so much from soaking in work from other people who were doing the same thing I was, but 10 or 20 or 100 times better.
Mm.
And so if we don't create those pathways for others to absorb through osmosis, especially in a remote first environment where you can't just like eavesdrop on the people around you, I think we're just going to make it so much harder for ourselves to create, an industry that spans generations.
Mm.
Um,
I wonder if in New York, because I know you're in New York area, if that's so in DC, the challenge we have is the cost of living. And so all of our positions are higher level positions, maybe because we're at headquarters of an agency or whatever. But I think a lot of it's the locale. That is also a bit of a wall, if you will, that they have to climb for a first job.
exactly. Some compromises were made in the early days of figuring out the hiring authorities at 18F. I think they were the right ones. But in order to pay in a way that felt somewhat commensurate with the private sector, we only hired GS 14s and 15s.
Mhm.
So it was wild that there would be like a 29-year-old individual contributor GS 15 just like dancing around with a MacBook. But that did help with pay, and it did really make sure that we got great folks in. But the barrier to getting those roles is so high.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I like that thought that I'm somebody who volunteers with organizations that are for people in their early career. I want more, we need more young people in government because government's got such a large number of old people. And so I'm constantly advocating. So this is something near and dear to my heart that you're suggesting right up. We need better pathways for the first or second job for people. especially in public service, right? We want them to learn and be like we are, where we're like, I'm passionate about public service and what we can do for the taxpayer and the services that government provides.
100%. The thing that I would have changed with me in this sort of digital services space is I think that I would have been less of a snob early on. There's a real, I think less so now, but there's a real tendency in this space as I was in to kind of only want to focus on the feel goodest projects. So lots of people really wanted to do benefits programs.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of people really wanted to do like justice work, you know? People did not necessarily get super excited about, a center of excellence cloud thing that was going to live in GSA IT and, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, which meant that I really missed the boat on some opportunities that were incredibly powerful. And then understanding the nuances of industries that were different from the ones that immediately occurred to me would have an impact. Like the woman who runs our finance and administration team, her name is Tammy. She's just absolutely incredible. One of the things that I have learned from her is that it's tough to be in finance and administration because everybody else has these cool feel-good stories and it's easy to connect with. And then her people are the people who just keep the lights on, who make the systems work. There's nobody who ever stops and says like, oh, gee whiz, thank you for this. Or, all I ever wanted to be was, the head of a retirement system program. And, but that work is exactly as impactful is not a word, but impactful as anything else that you can do. And it's work that needs to be done and deserves to be done.
I like that. So what's coming up for you here in the next year?
Great question. So my digital experience program is brand new as of 2024, which has been such an honor and an excitement to step into. I'm part of a larger group called Data and Digital Transformation. And what we're really trying to do is in the same way that AWS has built this experience in, I said before, like Medicaid, 911, tax, we're trying to build this sort of horizontal expertise in modern data strategies, in digital experience, eventually in systems. And so I think the next year is really growing and scaling and maturing that offering and making sure that we're able to really bring a consistent point of view to folks around that.
Wow. I'm looking forward to hearing more about that and seeing how it works out. Abby, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'm really happy you accepted my invitation, and it's been really great getting to know you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. It's been great getting to know you.